Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited. I've read your book, and it's an honor to have you on the show because you've got so much experience and you've done a lot for our country too, and you've accumulated crazy amounts of the real life School of Hard Knocks experience, along with the framework that you've put together. And for some of the listeners that may not know, a little bit about your background, maybe go back and kind of just give us a little bit of a debrief on where how you got into it, and kind of where you are today.
Sure. Thanks, Ryan. I was an FBI hostage negotiator. I was the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator. I was in charge of the negotiation strategies for every American kidnapped overseas for about 7 years, and so that kept me fairly busy. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I was an FBI agent for 24 years in total. Worked counterterrorism and counter kidnapping the entire time with the FBI. I'm originally a small town boy from Iowa. Left the bureau, thought this FBI Jedi mind tricks that we used had application to the business and private sector. So went through Harvard Law School's negotiation course as an FBI agent. I'm the only guy that ever did that. They ended up teaching there 2 years after that. Taught business negotiation at Harvard. Taught business negotiation at Georgetown University, taught business negotiation at USC, University of Southern California, in the MBA programs to MBA students. Finally decided to write a book. Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended Upon It. Has been doing really well since it came out. It leads the business negotiating category and has led it for almost the entire 2 years since it's been out. And it's cool. It's a fun book. And it's applicable. A lot of counterintuitive stuff, but although the stuff is not stuff that you would have thought of on your own, probably, it's really easy to understand. None of this is like the theory of relativity, which I still don't understand. Right. You don't got to be Einstein. All you got to be is Fred Flintstone to be able to apply this stuff.
Well, and that's maybe why I understood it, because I absolutely love the book, which is why I had reached out, because it's so applicable and it pulls from so many different backgrounds and, real world scenarios. And what was interesting, Chris, because you mentioned it in the book, but, up until until your book, The Getting to Yes, was like, the be all end all for negotiation books. And, you debunk a lot of stuff that was in there. And, maybe, for the people that haven't read the book, could you give us like a general brushstroke of the different kind of framework and theories that you'd gathered together to form the book?
Well, really what it is emotional intelligence. It's tactical empathy. It's weaponized empathy. But Getting to Yes is an intellectually sound book. There's nothing intellectually wrong with Getting to Yes. At reading it, which I have read, is like reading the dictionary, like trying to learn a language, reading the dictionary. There's nothing wrong with the dictionary, but it's hard to apply. Mm-hmm. And I think, the principal idea is Getting to Yes is, I think it's based on the idea that we as human beings are reasonable and rational. Now, hostage negotiation, on the other hand, never subscribed to that fiction. Because we figured that somebody waving a gun around a bank threatening to shoot people was irrational. Who knew that they were no different than the rest of us? Mm-hmm. It's like the way the FBI profilers. I don't know if you've ever seen Mindhunter on Netflix. Yeah. Or how many shows are there about the profilers? But the profilers, their original premise was criminal behavior was just human behavior. They just happened to be committing crime. And homicide was just really intense criminal behavior, so the patterns would just be easier to see, but it was still just human behavior. Mm-hmm. And as it turns out, the crazy thing about this is, as it turns out, hostage negotiation is the same thing. What people do under intense stress is exactly what they do normally. They resort to all their normal coping mechanisms. All the same rules apply. The brain, which we know so much more now about neuroscience, which we didn't know 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. We can watch the brain work, and the brain falls into patterns. And the brain, it's called the limbic system in your brain. So what does that mean? Well, the limbic system works the same way your respiratory system does. Your respiratory system works by certain rules. The limbic system works by certain rules. We have the science now that backs it up. Hostage negotiators, crazily enough, tapped into that science back in the 1970s because we couldn't see in the brain. And now all the neuroscience backs up the soundness of the emotional intelligence of hostage negotiators. We're emotional creatures.
So describe, your tactical empathy, and you did an awesome job in the book. And I think there's this, the real empathy, and then like the empathy in the way that normal people think about, then the tactical empathy that you describe in the book. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a snippet of what that means?
Yeah, a couple things. All right. So we're more driven by negative thoughts than we are positive thoughts. There's a rough ratio of 3-to-1. So tactically, if I want to make a deal with you, I'll get to the deal faster if I diffuse your negative thoughts than if I try to enhance your positive thoughts. A typical business deal is, here are the benefits for you. This will make you happy. That's pitching the positive. It's not to say you can't make deals that way. It's not to say you can't make agreements that way. That's just not the fastest, most powerful way. If you're lazy like me, I want to do a third of the amount of work
right.
as you. I want you to spend 3 times longer on a deal. I want to spend a third of the amount of time you're going to spend. I diffuse the negatives. I'll spend a third the amount of time as you'll spend, if you get the deal at all, pitching a positive. Now, all right, so then now what do you do with that? What you do with that is actually the 2 millimeter shift, to use a Tony Robbins phrase. I love Tony Robbins' ideas. And he talks about, what are the 2 millimeter shifts? 2 millimeter shift in dealing with the negatives. Don't deny negatives, just identify them. Like if you and I are in a deal and I get the sense that you feel that I'm pushing you around, all right, so I should listen to that instinct. My emotional intelligence alarm bells are going off. That's probably pretty accurate. But instead of denying it and me saying, I don't want you to feel like I'm pushing you around, that's the worst thing I could say. The 2 millimeter shift is, hey, I'm sure it seems like I'm pushing you around. Going from a denial to an observation.
Mm-hmm.
The observation, and there's a book that I love called The Upward Spiral, where they did experiments that bears this out, is the identification of a negative, not the denial of a negative, but the identification of the negative dials it down every time without fail.
Why is that?
Why does, I don't know. Why do we need oxygen? Because that's the way our respiratory system is set up. Mm-hmm. We do know, and I'd like to know how they negotiated this experiment. Here's the brain science experiment that bared it out. They literally ran wires into the part of the brain where the negative emotions are sort of enhanced. It's the amygdala, and it's the organ in the brain, and we've all heard of the amygdala hijack.
Yep.
Where you get mad. What we didn't realize is the amygdala is working all the time, not just when it's hijacking you. It's like the heart. The heart's working all the time, whether you're paying attention to it or not. So, and the negativity in the amygdala is in a certain location. So they monitored the electrical activity in that location, and then they showed people pictures that induced negative emotions, whether it was fear, sadness, anxiety. They had a list of negative emotions. They show somebody the picture, and they just have them self-label, self-identify. They'd say, what emotion is this picture making you feel? And a person would look at a picture that was making them feel sad, and they'd say, it makes me feel sad. And the minute that they self-labeled, the electrical activity in the negative region dropped every time, 1,000% of the time. So the self-labeling process, what a hostage negotiator does is word an observation in a way that bypasses the logical part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of the brain, and hits the amygdala dead on, which causes this self-labeling contemplation, and it drops it down. What difference does that make? 3 times the barriers are around the negativity.
Well, and it probably is tied into our inherent need to be understood too, because you can actually, is that kind of where the tactical empathy, phrase comes from, where you're trying to understand someone's scenario and situation?
We have an inherent need to be understood. It's the old Stephen Covey advice: seek first to understand, then be understood. Everybody wants to have you understand them first. The problem is, Covey didn't tell us how to do that. He didn't realize that it's not saying I understand, which is actually like, that's the worst thing you can say to somebody in a negotiation. We literally, in hostage negotiation, that's such a bad habit that I would actually put a big sheet of paper on a wall in our command center where the hostage negotiators would be working. I would write the phrase, I understand, on a piece of paper, put it right in front of the negotiator, and then put a red circle around it and a red line through it. You know, the do not do this symbol, like this is not allowed. And if they, I'd leave it in front of them the whole time. And I'd say, if you ever say, I understand, we're taking you off the phone. It's that bad.
So what is a way to just, is it through the labeling process that you're showing them you understand versus actually saying it?
Yeah, it's a combination of the labeling process is one component. Another component is going to be paraphrasing, and another component is going to be summarizing. Another component is like, just to get them to talk more, is we got a tool that's called a mirror. And if you were to mirror what I just said, you'd say a tool called a mirror, and I'd say, yeah, a tool called a mirror. What a mirror is repeating the last 1 to 3 words of what somebody just said. If you'd have mirrored me, what I would have done was expand on that point automatically. It's literally an automatic response. So you get somebody talking, and that's how you generate this whole feeling of being understood.
Well, and I love this because there's all these things that you're talking about are in the real world, no matter where you are in any given situation. And I think, for our listeners who are getting pushed or are looking towards like one of the biggest stressful, emotional, financial situations of their life, of selling their hard work of their business, all of these things come to a head. And again, you had said that the amygdala gets it gets hijacked in a lot of these situations.
Right.
And so, if you're an owner, if you're someone in a situation like this and you're preparing to go down this route, what are some of the things that you should start doing to get prepared to go to a negotiation battle, or however you want to phrase it? Like, what are some of the primary things that you advise people to do before they go into a situation like this?
Well, and it's the standard negotiation advice, even though you got so much at stake, where you're being taken hostage a little bit. All right, so first, the one thing that we love to talk about is let out no a little at a time. Like, and the book starts out in the first 5 pages is the ultimate way to say no to the other side without making them feel hurt, without driving them from the table, and how to actually get more out of them simultaneously. And it's, just practices saying, how am I supposed to do that? And saying it just like that. I mean, that is the single best way to find out how much is on the table. Now, find out how much is on the table before you start reacting to what's on the table. And know, especially, there's Nobel Prize winning theory called prospect theory. The other side is gonna offer you less than what you think your business is worth. Mm-hmm. And they're not because they're trying to lowball you, but because since they don't own it, deep down in their heart, they're gonna think what they think of as a fair price is still gonna be less than what you think of as fair. And they're not gonna do that to screw with you. Mm-hmm. Because most of the time when somebody offers you a low price, the amygdala hijack is, that's not fair. You're just lowballing me. You're trying to cheat me. You're trying to steal my life's work. Now, make no mistake, there are going to be a few people out there that are going to try to steal your life's work. But 75% of the people are actually going to try to give you a good deal. So 75% of the people you encounter, that would be an inappropriate reaction for. They just don't know any better. And the mere fact that the other guy on the other side of the table might not be screwing with you should free you up to help you explore the deal, and then take it or not.
Well, okay, so I love it. And, as there's a couple things also that you had mentioned in the book that I think is hugely valuable to note too, because, there's that whole thing of the getting the yes, which is your lowest benchmark. I can't remember what the acronym is. So there's a couple of things that you guys had suggested to do differently, which is going in there with the best and the worst case scenario. But then there's the whole theory which is your consulting company, the Black Swan. And I think it's immensely important in a negotiation with the buying or the selling of your company, because there's black swans on both sides of the table. So maybe if you could answer that in two parts. One is like, how do mentally, how do they go into that with the best and worst case, and then explaining maybe what the black swan theory is?
Sure. All right. Yeah. I mean, focus on what the best case scenario is really. I mean, you got to have a goal. The problem is thinking through worst case scenario, a lot of human beings will end up with that being their goal. And if they beat the worst case scenario, they're like, hey, I did good. I got a victory. And you left so much on the table. That's the biggest problem with thinking worst case scenario. As a hostage negotiator, I just, and that concept that you're talking about is called BATNet, best alternative to negotiated agreement. And some people will die if they don't have a BATNet. Well, no negotiation I had ever had a BATNet. So I just got used to walking a tightrope without a net. What's the big deal?
Yeah, you can't really. I mean, the worst case scenario is extremely bad in your situation.
Yeah, but I mean, like whether or not there's a net on you when you're on a tightrope, it doesn't actually change how tight the tightrope is. It doesn't change the wind. It doesn't change how far you have to go. It doesn't change one iota of what you got to do to cross that tightrope. It's all in your head.
Mm-hmm.
So I found it immensely liberating to negotiate from the very beginning, just not caring what BATNet was. I don't think it's any big deal not to have an alternative. And some people, it scares the hell out of them. They can't move forward without it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first part. Now, the other thing that you asked me about was, the whole black swan thing. No matter how smart you are, there's a better deal than what you can imagine on the table. No matter how smart you are. Because the other side is holding cards. They're always holding cards you don't know anything about. You're holding cards that they don't know anything about. And see, the bizarre intersection there is, what's the overlap in those hidden cards? And so there's always a better deal. Now, if you can engage in a conversation and show the other person that you're trustworthy and you're worth revealing those cards to, the idea is to get them to show you your cards.
Well, can you explain a little bit about like the black swan theory? Because I think it's extremely relevant, because it's something that, it's not necessarily a card that you know about, right?
Half of them are cards you would have no idea are there, like utterly clueless to, because there's going to be stuff going on in their world that you would never, no matter how much research you did, even if you bugged their offices and dug through their trash and looked through their documents, there's going to be stuff there that you can only find out if they tell you. And that's what and they're typically typically stuff the other side has no idea is important, because see, they don't know what cards you're hiding, so there's no way they can know what's important to you, and they're usually little things.
Well, and do you have I'm trying to think of a couple, random examples of let's say someone wanted to sell their company to someone, but it's not just about the price that they're willing to pay, right? I mean, this is something like how they might do operations that could increase your leverage, right? Because it's something that they're explaining, but they don't know it's important to you, because you would have a higher a degree of leverage because of what they told you, yet they didn't know that would have harmed them, right? In the negotiation, or something similar to that.
Yeah, there may be a payout for them that works really well that they have no idea is important to you. I mean, price is only one term.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was working kidnappings, international kidnappings are about ransom. There's no way around it. So we ran them as sting operations. You got to get some of the money in the bad guy's hands because it's evidence. And one example of that actually a long time ago, when we first really discovered how powerful this was, kidnapping gang working in Ecuador, they'd hit oil platforms for 3 straight years. On the 3rd year, we decided to do a controlled ransom payment, and we rounded up 50 bad guys and got 75% of the money back. It wouldn't have mattered if we got 10% of the money back, because we took out the whole kidnapping gang. Now, if we'd have done an assault on the oil platform, we'd only got the kidnappers. We got their money launderers, we got their leaders, we got their planners, we got the people they did business with. We took out the entire operation, which we never would have been able to do if there'd have been an assault on the oil platform. So you want to take out the whole side. All right, so that's why we pay. Why do we pay? What difference does it make? I could have agreed, if somebody wanted $10 million, I could have agreed for $10 million because just try and get that money out of me. Like, I'm the master at bogging you down in details. You think the other side's lawyers will screw you up in the terms and conditions phase after you sign a deal. The worst lawyer, the worst foot-dragging lawyer on the other side of the table's got nothing on a hostage negotiator when we go into implementation mode. I will make you bleed from the ears and make you feel like you're in control the whole way. And what's the point of that? The point of that is price is irrelevant to term. Right.
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because that was going to be one of my questions, where I actually have a different podcast episode that was titled "You Tell Me the Price, I'll Tell You the Terms," because there's all this. It's trying to get someone to start to move towards action, but then there's the whole due diligence phase. And I don't know, Chris, if you heard the stat that 80% of sales don't go through. So 80% of these companies that go to market, they actually fall apart in due diligence or whatever it might be because of this entire situation. So, what is it about the details? So when you're doing that, what is it that you're doing that the other person is not necessarily aware of?
Well, what we'll do is we'll know that there are deal killers away from the table that won't come to the table because their primary objective is to kill the deal, and primarily because they weren't consulted sufficiently going into the deal. Lawyers are famous for this. In-house counsel on the other side, they're mad that they're not negotiating all the deals for the companies, and that other people out there making deals. So what are they going to do because they're mad that they weren't involved? When the terms and conditions phase comes up, they're going to look to rip it apart because they're trying to show everybody they should have been in charge. Everybody knows that's the case. What do you do about it as a result? Calibrate questions in the interaction that will cause them to have to go back to their lawyers and ask questions. Now, they won't know you're doing that to them. You're going to be innocent. Like, who else does this affect? And what are they going to think of this? And how do we know for sure that the people behind you are good with this? Now, to your face, your point of contact will say, oh, they're fine, they're good, they're fine. Don't worry about that. You don't care what the answer is. You care what you ask that same question in 4 straight meetings. Your point of contact starts to get nervous. He's going to go back and ask the deal killers away from the table, which is what you're designed to do. Now the deal killers away from the table feel involved, and they're less likely to kill the deal once it's been brought to them because their ego satisfaction has been taken place. So we're going to use the process to bring people to the table without them knowing we brought them to the table.
Well, is that a way to going back to the Black Swan theory of these, I think, what did you say? There's about average of like 1 to 3 or something like that, these things that people don't know are extremely important behind the scenes. There's a couple of them usually in every scenario.
We like to say at the end of a negotiation, if you haven't found at least 3 things that totally surprise you in the course of the conversation, then you failed.
Well, and what's really crazy interesting about that is so many people that I've interviewed on the show, of people that have sold, or the people that we work with that they've sold their companies, so many times it's not until after the deal closed that they realize why that buyer bought their company, which is just, it's like this huge surprise most of the time. And, that's why I think there's a information out there that, 3 out of 4 owners aren't happy because they bought you, they said it's for the culture, but then all of a sudden it was for the client list and they had no idea, and everything turned out to be differently after the deal. So when you're going through this process, how can a business owner or their advisors or whoever flush out these black swans to literally figure out why is it this buyer is interested in me?
It's kind of a 2-pronged phase that needs to go up front. You got to be deferential. There's great power in deference. There's a tremendous deal-making attorney. I live in Los Angeles, a guy named Tom Girardi. Tom Girardi's been named the top trial attorney in California multiple times. Tom Girardi, when you meet him, you look at this guy and you go, this is the guy everybody's scared of? This guy, he should be Santa at Macy's.
Got the picture. I love it.
And so he walks into my negotiation class, and I just know of him by reputation. I haven't heard the guy speak before he walks in the door. a mutual friend helped set it up. And I'm like, wow, what is this attack dog going to say? And this guy comes walking in and he says, the secret to negotiations is being nice and gentle. Now, when you're nice and gentle, the other side stops to drop their guard and they stop to run off at the mouth and they feel superior and they feel in control. And that's when people start to reveal what they're really after. So you start out by being deferential and you say things to them deferentially and innocently. And one of the great ones that we love, why is one of the most emotionally charged words in the English language, if not any language. If I say to you, why did you do that? You're going to feel you did something wrong and that I'm accusing you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to immediately want to defend and justify it. That's 100% of the time, every single time. You got to be very careful with the word why, because most people, 99% of the time, they ask it wrong. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people that I've taught, we used to teach them never ask why. But here's where you go. Here's how you use why. It's called what we call proof of life. What's the proof of life? What's really in here? You deferentially and innocently ask people up front, like, why would you ever want to buy my business?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just don't see the fit for you guys. Why would you ever want to do it? And it's their opportunity to defend why they want it. They're more likely to reveal a truth because they're educating you. And people love to educate other people. Love it. You're appealing to the side of their ego that makes them feel large and in charge. And because of that, if they're educating you, they're more likely to tell you what's really going on because their guard's not up.
Yeah, because I mean, there's naturally you just want to explain why, right? Because you just want to be you're drawn to explain and to educate. And the other the other follow up and some of those questions, and maybe you kind of elaborate on the why versus the how and what, because I think when you get down the line with the terms and conditions, and as the deal continues to kind of like erode in the perfect vision of all cash up front that you had, explain how your rebuttals and how you're negotiating the tactics of like how you use the how and what responses and the calibrated questions.
Yeah. All right. So and I love that you picked up that we call them calibrated, because every question is calibrated for effect. Like if you don't know what your emotional impact, what your emotional effect of your question is before you ask it, or the words that you use, you're firing a gun without having any idea what targets you're hitting. So how and what again is still along the lines of being very deferential, making the other side feel in charge, triggering in-depth answers that they don't get defensive about. And so your why should only be up front for proof of life. Now when they come up with a term and you're not uncertain about the term, you don't want to say, why do you want that term? You want to say, what is it about this that works for you? What's the purpose behind this? How does this impact things? You're going back and forth on the why or on the what's and the hows. And you're actually asking kind of the same question three different ways to make the answer three-dimensional. And you start to tease out what's really going on. And you tease it out in terms of down the line. I mean, how does this affect the long-term survivability of the business? How does this affect your portfolio? How does this affect what's at stake? What makes this a good term? You can get into a position of asking these questions and then actually once you get into what these sorts of questions, which some people refer to as guided discovery, with deference, you can control the entire direction of the conversations. There's so much control, not control, but what you do is you box people in and they don't know you boxed them in with the question.
Well, and how can you explain or maybe elaborate too on how you're doing that with those questions instead of saying no? Because I think maybe I'll give you an example to tee up and you can elaborate on it is, a lot of times it's like, okay, I'm going to give you $5 million for your business, but, $1 million up front, maybe $3 million and a long-term earn out that you have to work for us and it's tied to compensation, and then another in holdback. So essentially you're not getting the money. You're like stuck into a job. So a lot of people immediately viscerally react to that, say no, all the normal non non professional ways to negotiate. So how do you back yourself out of a situation that you've been backed into like that by, you know, not saying no, like someone would want to say?
Well, the first thing to do is, you know, you got to get good at saying, how am I supposed to do that? And saying it at least 3 times, at least 3 different ways. So the first thing is going to be like, how am I supposed to do that? And then let it sink in. You know, this is what we call letting out no a little at a time. Now, this is a context-driven question. It actually, you know, my son Brandon, who's my director of operations and our best negotiation coach, he called this forced empathy. You force the other side, force them to look at the offer they've given you in context. And they don't know that you just forced them. It's what I talked before about boxing them in, and they don't even know it. So it's this great context, empathy forcing, context forcing question. That's why you want to say it deferential, like, how am I supposed to do that? And if there's movement in the terms, they're going to give the movement without you asking for movement. You want to get movement without asking for it because you don't want to trigger reciprocity. You don't want to owe. You want them to feel like that it was their idea, which then increases implementation. There's a lot of psychological, emotional intelligence at work through every single word. Make the other side feel in control.
So can you give us, Chris, maybe an example? Because you had some really good ones that I've heard before, but like, you know, one where you saw, you know, whether there's a student or in your experience of how someone used that phrase, how am I supposed to do that to get a better outcome or get to the progress that they wanted?
Yeah. One of my favorites off the top of my head, because everybody's afraid that when you say, how am I supposed to do that? The other side's going to say, because you have to, because you have no choice. That's actually the response that you want. And you should not stop saying, how am I supposed to do that, till they say that to you. There was a deal that was going on here in Los Angeles. One of my students is a high net worth wealth advisor, is trying to rent lease a home in a Hollywood Hills for a trust fund baby. So the home that they're looking to lease is in the vicinity of the 20 grand or more per month. Like, I don't spend that much in a year. You know, and this is a monthly outlay. So they're in the negotiation with the real estate agent, and the net worth wealth advisor says, how's my client supposed to pay that? And they said, well, you're right. Now, I understand when someone says you're right, that is not responsive to the question. You know, it's about triggering what you say and what they heard, being conscious of what they actually hear, because nobody actually listens. So you're trying to create a dialogue. You're affecting a dialogue that's going on in their brain. The person says, you're right. That is a little high. And they start to talk, and they drop the price, and they talk about a bunch of other terms. And the conversation always goes around through a lot of other things where you have to say it again. So they get back to the retail, the lease term again. And of course, it worked before. So the net worth advisor says, you know, how's my client supposed to pay that? And the person on the other side said, because if your client wants a house, they'll pay it. Boom, perfect. That's where you want to be, because now you've just finally you found out everything that's on the table in regards to that term, which is your job as a negotiator. It doesn't obligate you to take the deal. What it does is push the other side to their limit without making them mad enough to walk away, which is in fact your job as a negotiator on every given term. It also does obligate you in no way, shape, or form to take it. You've never put yourself in a position and said, well, if you come into this range, I'll take the deal. And if the other side says, okay, here, you got it. You say to yourself, holy shit, I should have asked for more. Sorry for the profanity.
Yeah.
But you never want to put yourself in a position where what you said to get a term obligates you to take that term. All you want to do is fully explore. Now, let's say they throw a term at you that just doesn't work, and it's a deal killer. Well, you've already telegraphed to them that you have a problem with this term. You don't want to say no abruptly. You want to give the other side every chance to make the deal, and that, you know, then we'll step saying no down, and we'll say it a little bit more directly. And now, if it still doesn't work, we say, look, you know, you're being very generous, which is a counterintuitive to say when the other side's being stingy, but it's actually ridiculously, emotionally, intelligently smart. Mm-hmm. You say, you're being very generous. That just doesn't work for me. I'm sorry. It just doesn't work for me. Now you've given them one more real good warning that they need to fix the deal before you walk away, and you haven't insulted them or threatened them or backed them into a corner by doing that. But you are now telling them that we're getting close to the end of the deal if you don't sweeten the pot, without creating any obligations on any side. And since if the other side's not backed into a corner, you need to find out every possible advantage you could get. And if they're backed into a corner, what they're going to do is they're going to hold back intentionally because they're mad. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to trigger that. Because then even, like you said, even after you sign the deal, you got a phase to go through, and you don't want the surprises to be in the terms and conditions phase after you've signed the deal.
So in that part of the negotiation, and because you got how am I supposed to do that? And, some of these calibrated questions that you're asking, can you explain, because I think it's so amazing, the no. It was actually totally shocking to me. Your whole perspective on the word no versus yes. Because I think everybody's reaction is to say no immediately, and first of all, or to be scared shitless of the word no, because you're
yeah,
right. So that's what, and the difference between no versus yes. Can you explain? Because I think it's applicable. If there's one thing for anyone to take away, is like how to view that in a different light.
Right. So it's not the word itself, it's the context of the word. It's what you calibrated for it to do. And, a calibrated no, and that's why we continue to use the phrase calibrated question. A calibrated no is worth at least 5 yeses, at least, if not more. And so in the midst of a negotiation, you can say to the other side, when you would want to say, do you want this to work? You simply say, do you want this to fail? You take any question that you might want to get a yes to, and you just flip the way that you ask it, so that essentially you get the same result with a no. But when people say no, they feel safe and protected, and they're going to tend to answer the next 4 questions for you. And they'll say, no, I don't want it to fail. But in order for us to make this work, we got to do this, 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 and this. Bang, bang, bang. You just got the rest of the information you need.
Why is it so natural for people to do that then?
That's a crazy idea. I think, that's the one that's such a new idea that I have not yet found the brain science. So my emotional intelligence experience tells me that people feel safe and protected when they say no. And because feeling safe and protected, you are now going to open your ears up, and you're probably going to want to push things forward because you don't feel you're committing to anything. You're just outlining implementation.
Well, and I think it's so interesting because, all the BS behind the yeses we give people, we just totally don't mean it. And,
right.
You're like, oh, sure. Yeah, I'll get back to you. Or, yeah, we want to make this deal. And people are just lying through their teeth. So, right. Is there something that you've seen, Chris, where like they're, if you were to ask me a no question that like triggers me to justify something or another, like, cause I've seen it work since I've read the book. And so is there something you've seen, or like how you can guide that no process into getting the information because people just start blabbling? I'm just so curious on why that happens.
Yeah, it's all I know is that it happens to us time after time. First example, one of the first most powerful ones I did, I asked Jack Welch to come speak at a negotiation course I'm teaching at USC. It's at a book signing. There's 200 people in line. They're doing everything they can. They're doing everything they can to minimize your time with Jack Welch to 3 seconds because there's 200 people in line, and everybody wants something from him. Everybody's trying to get him to say yes to something. Like, Jack, would you come over to the house for dinner tonight? My wife makes a great meatloaf. Whatever it is. Everybody's asking him crazy stuff. Jack, Jack, give me a hug. Whatever it is. Everybody's trying to get him to say yes. So I walk up to him and I say, is it a ridiculous idea for you to come speak at the negotiation course I teach at USC? That quick. I didn't even tell him my name. And he freezes. And he looks up into the left, and he gets this ridiculously intense scowl on his face. And he freezes. I swear it felt like 6 hours. It was probably 15 seconds. Like, I thought my heart stopped. He looked furious. And then I thought, he was so furious, he just had a stroke and died. I thought he was going to fall over right in front of me. But when he finally unfreezes, he looks at me and he says, this is my personal assistant's name. This is a special Twitter account that we have set up to communicate with her. I will call her and let her know that you're going to be reaching out for her. I think we're going to be in Los Angeles in the fall. If we are, coming to speak to your class. Understand, he just answered my next 5 questions, which is, who do I need to get a hold of? How do I coordinate her with her? What's your travel schedule? How do we work this out? I mean, that's literally 5 questions. But having triggered the no, he then thought through 5 more implementation questions. Boom, 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 boom. Laid it all out for me. That happens every time we do this. Every time. Nobody ever just says no. They go, no, and this, and this.
It's so crazy. Chris, I literally got done. Like, I paused the book when I was listening to it, and I got done, and I wrote that email that you suggested in the book for my gentleman that hasn't gotten back to me in 6 weeks. And I shit you not, it was 3 minutes, and I got a response. So explain to the listeners that email, or your kind of outline on how to get someone to come up from air that they haven't seen for a while.
Yeah, and it's have you given up on XYZ, whatever it is. 1-line email, 1-line text. Literally, you'll get an answer in 3 to 5 minutes from people who have not been communicating with you for months. It's ridiculous. Like, you send that message, sit there and stare at your screen, because it's coming back.
I literally got an explanation too. I mean, it was eerie, actually.
Yeah, it's freaky, right? It's and we're not seeing it fail us.
Well, and I think, all these different things are so crazy interesting, because, when you're going through, selling your business, the steps are, okay, I'm agreeing mentally that I want to do this. Like, who are my buyers? And then it's literally engagement or interaction after interaction where you're essentially fighting for your life.
Yeah.
And there is no, essentially up until your book, there's no rules of engagement about how to go and you don't know when you're giving stuff up, even though the whole time, because most often or not, the buyers have done this a gazillion times, and you're the first person, it's the first time you've ever doing this.
Yeah. Talk about not being a fair fight, right?
And how do how have you seen that people can use these kind of tactics if they've got other people involved, right? So there's a lot of people that'll hire an investment banker or business broker to kind of fend on their behalf. And, you always were explaining, value of FaceTime, and then the ability to read behaviors and all that stuff. Like, what do you do if you've got someone that's out there on the front lines for you?
Yeah, well, the person that's on the front lines for you, they're human beings. So you gotta, they're going to try to push together a deal because that's how they get paid. And I don't mean anything by it.
Right.
They're going to try to push both sides together. They're trying to do whatever they can to get the deal without realizing how much you have on the line. So, managing them is as important as managing the process.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no better way to manage people than with the calibrated questions of what and how, particularly in that instance. Because what it's called, you want to tire them out more than the other side tires them out. What does that mean? They're going to pound on the other side more than they're going to pound on you.
So, I mean, is that detrimental if they're on your side, though, or not?
Well, you want to push your people as much as you can without threatening them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're on your side, and many of your business brokers, like any other broker in any other business, they are on your side. They want to see you get paid. They want to get you the best payout possible as quickly as they can, because they want you to be able to move on with your life. And they don't want this to linger. Now, they don't know that there's a really good chance that just by lengthening the process by 20%, there's a really good chance you'll increase the payout by more than 20%. It's really counterintuitive to do that. They're gonna think of all the deals that they push together quickly. Then they're gonna be proud as hell that they cut the deal for you, as opposed to fighting for every last dime. Now, it's hard on them, and that's why understanding that it's hard on them. How do you manage them without making them feel picked on, beaten up, backed into a corner? You manage them with the calibrated questions of what and how.
So why? What's the backdrop of the 20% deal?
That's just off the top of my head. I mean, mm-hmm. I do a lot of coaching with real estate agents, and they're brokering people's hopes and dreams.
Yep.
A business is it's their hopes and dreams for the future. It's their memories of the past. You built up a business is your child. You got memories of the past. You got hopes and dreams for the future for the sale of that business. The same sort of emotional dynamics as there are in selling a home, whether it's a hot market or a cold market. The agents know what it's going to take to let the market speak to them and let the market tell us what it's worth. Now, and I've had a lot of agents go out. The market has spoken. This is what the market wants.
Right.
And they'll bring it back to the client, and the client will be just devastated.
Yep.
And the agent will say, well, but the market has spoken. This is what the market wants. And I've had a number of agents that I've talked into saying, like, you know what? Go back out and let the market speak again. Run the process at least one more time. Maybe you think that the market spoke, but one announcement from the market ain't enough. And in time after time after time, we've had listing brokers who say, I know the market, I've been doing this for 20 years, the market has spoken. If they go back and run it again, they're shocked with the higher result enough times that they feel horrible for not having run it a second time.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see that.
But getting them to do that is a hard thing to do because your broker has worked very hard for you.
Mm-hmm.
Your broker's got more intelligence, more experience in the market than you do because they've been in the market for 6 months. They got more intelligence, more experience in the market. But this is very deceptive for brokers and agents. But they don't know it is, and you got to get them out of that without them knowing that you've gotten them out.
So, I mean, you're just applying all the same tactics to them to just make sure that, they don't feel like they're, because I've been in that same situation with my own real estate agent where, like, you don't want them to be pissed off and upset when they're going out to market. You want them to be on board for why they're doing that, right?
Right. Yeah, you want them to feel good about it. You want them to have some appreciation, that every person says they want to under-promise and over-deliver. And then they want to under-deliver and over-promise. But people feel good about doing a phenomenal job.
Mm-hmm,
and so it's helping them do a phenomenal job. It's helping them actually walk the talk that they gave you earlier on.
I know we're getting short here on time, Chris, but one last little question that I got, because I think it's a big challenge that we struggle with in our sale, and then a lot of people have that we've interviewed or talked to. But how do you separate emotion from the process? Because it's your baby, it's your house, it's your business, it's all these things that usually people or someone's loved one, right? I mean, how do you separate the emotion from the process if you're the one on that side of the table?
Well, you don't want to separate emotion. You want to separate negative emotion.
Okay.
And there's a difference. We don't want to be dispassionate. Actually, we think better in a positive frame of mind. We think better with positive emotion working for us. We make better decisions. We see situations clearer more quickly. We see patterns more quickly. So the issue is not emotion, it's negative emotion. So how do we separate it? Well, it's how do we diminish its impact? Not that we separate it. And that's the stupid thing. What at the very beginning, the mere recognition of negative emotions diminishes those negative emotions. And that sounds too stupidly simple to be true.
But it's pretty crazy, though.
The brain science backs it up every time.
Well, yeah, I'm just like, I'm just thinking of examples. I mean, just even saying to someone at the deal closing, this is my baby. How am I supposed to let go of it and know that it's going to be fine? And just like calling it what it is, right?
There you go. That's beautiful. How am I supposed to let go of it and know it's going to be fine? That's a brilliant question to ask.
Yeah, I'm definitely Flintstone material too, and I'm not some PhD. Well, Chris, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I mean, I absolutely love your book. If there's one thing you wanted to highlight that we've talked about, because we've talked a lot about various different things, or leave our listeners with one last thing, what would it be?
Yeah, other than telling them how to get a hold of me, but in a negotiation, let the other side go first. I mean, you don't take yourself hostage. You don't got to react. You don't got to take what they throw out on the table. let them go first. The chances are that they'll spontaneously give you something you didn't expect is going to be better because they're dying to talk anyway. They're not going to listen to a word you say till they've had their say. So, you're saving time by letting them go first.
I love it. And then, of course, I was going to let you give a little shout out about your book and your company's website and everything in the newsletter. So what's the best way for the listeners to reach out to you and get a good dose of all the stuff we talked about?
All right. So the gateway to everything we have is the once a week newsletter we put out, which is complimentary. It's free. I used to have a friend that said, if it's free, I'll take 3. And so the name of it is The Edge. Comes out once a week, a single short digestible article in every one. Quick short read. You don't get some newsletters wear you out just deciding what to read.
Right.
And also any sort of training we have coming up, it's the gateway to our website. It's the gateway to all the products that we charge for, many of which are free. It's also the gateway where is the best place to buy the book, which is always Amazon. Never split the difference. But The Edge is a newsletter, and the quickest and easiest way to sign up for the subscription is to text the word, all one word, FBI empathy. Don't let your autocorrect put a space in between FBI and empathy. Not case sensitive, FBI empathy, all one word. Text it to the number 22828. That's 22828. You get a text response. Sign you up for the newsletter. It's a gateway to everything we have.
I love it. And read the book if you haven't. It's amazing. Chris, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
It's awesome, Chris. Hopefully you had fun and enjoyed it too.
I did, man. That went fast. That was great.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. Thank you, man. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, I loved it. So what I'll do is I'll be circling Brooke back in with all that we, like I said, we make it stupidly simple. We give you social media postings and blurbs and the iframe and the links and all that stuff so you don't have to do much work.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Rock on with the book. I really mean it. It's like literally, I've been in sales my whole life too. And no one has ever given anything as applicable as this. And it takes the thinking fast and slow and all the other PhD gobbledygook out there and puts it into real stuff. So I can totally see why you've been crushing it out there.
If you put that word if you haven't already done it, what you just said, if you put that word for word in a 5-star review on Amazon, I'd be eternally grateful.
Yeah, you got it. Guarantee it.
Thanks, man.
All right, Chris. Have a good one, man.
All right. Bye-bye.